you would automatically think that China and Asia will represent even larger opportunities. China is the world's largest country of food production and food consumption. So if we can really solve certain subsector challenges, the magnitude of impact that we're talking about is massive. But there was no one doing it in China and Asia at that time, back in 2016. So that was when I realized, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If nobody heard about food tech and ad tech in Asia, why, shouldn't I be the first one to tackle this issue?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Essence of Investing, where we explore the stories, strategies, wit, and wisdom of investors from across the Asia region and beyond. I'm your host, Jonathan Reckman. My guest today, the one and only Matilda Ho, founder and managing director of Bits and Bytes, the first food tech accelerator and VC fund in China that invests in entrepreneurs tackling global food system challenges. In this conversation, we cover Matilda's journey in the food space, from consumer to consultant to entrepreneur to investor. We talk about how specialist funds have a strategic advantage over generalists outside of TMT. And we get a dose of inspiration about mindful eating, living and working with purpose, and 100 ways to cook an egg. We recorded our conversation on Zoom. Please forgive us if the audio or visual lags. Please listen, like, share, give feedback, and most of all, enjoy. The Essence of Investing is powered by Next Level Communication and by the world of allocators. Next Level Communication helps investors and multinational executives in Asia tell their stories to their most important global stakeholders. Get in touch at reachnextlevel.net to learn more about cross-border IR, strategic communication, and presentation training services. The world of allocators encourages long-term thinking and the adoption of the endowment approach among asset managers in China. Get in touch to join our community of domestic and overseas practitioners to share and learn. Let's jump right in. So thrilled to have you join us today and really excited to hear your story. This is where we like to begin all our conversations is where do you come from and how did you get to where you are today?
Hi, my name is Matilda. My pleasure to be here to share my stories and just a little bit of my background. I'm Matilda. I'm the founder and managing director of Bits and Bytes, and we are China's pioneer agriculture and food tech VC. I actually didn't know how I got where I am today, but I guess there are several points in my past that shape who I am today. A lot of people ask me, why do you focus on agriculture or food? Did you come from a farm family or did you come from a chef family? But I was actually originally raised from a very typical middle-class family from Taipei, very traditional tiger mom culture. So I was not allowed to step into kitchen in the first 25 years of my life. And my mom would have told me, only if you screw up in your grades, then you will become a chef. So don't even learn how to cook. So that was a pretty dramatic upbringing that I didn't even know how to use a microwave when I first moved to Chicago as an international schools, business school student. But that was really when I started my relationship with food, because when I moved to Chicago, I was a poor student. I didn't have any money to dine out, so I really need to learn how to cook or chop vegetables. And then you starting to go into supermarket and you look at all the food from the shelf. And I really learned a lot from, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods that, wow, there are so many different apples. There are so many different type of veggies. There's so many different ways of cooking method. And then I started to realize food is not just essential or functional. It could also be social, emotional, experiential. And that was also when I started traveling and backpacking to all the different countries around the world. And I still remember, I was amazed by there are more than 1,000 different types of onions and potatoes when I traveling in Lima. And that is like the biggest dream if you want to be a chef. That would be the city that you want to be. And there are so many options. There's so many diversity. And I really discovered my passion for food when I was started traveling around the world since 25. And then, I decided that I wanted to relocate to Shanghai, becoming a management consultant. And I was then specializing in the agriculture and food space for 5 years. And that was when I started to work on a lot of different projects and started to realize how difficult it is to access safe and clean food in China. And that was another big twist for myself because, I just came back from the US learning so many amazing experiences around food. And all of a sudden, even going into a restaurant, you're not so sure whether that dish was clean or is it, heavy metal residue? You don't know. And that was when I realized I wanted to do something. I wanted to make a change for that. And on January 1st, 2015, pretty dramatic, I decided that I don't want to write any PowerPoint slides anymore. I wanted to do something about food and agriculture. And that's when I went ahead and started my own startup, my first startup, which is Yimishiji. And it's a online marketplace that we basically bring all the organically grown produce and antibiotics-free meat directly from farmers and growers to families. And we wanted to create that platform to really bring that organic and sustainable food education to Chinese consumers. That was really more about how do you create a more mindful diet and lifestyle to Chinese consumers. And then running that after 2 years, I decided to create Bits and Bytes as an early stage venture capital platform to really back scientists and technology-led solutions to further address food security and sustainability issues of the agri-food supply chain. So that's where we are. We have since then raised $100 million from family offices to institutional investors to sovereign funds. And now we have since then backed 16 companies across pre-Series A, Series A, and Series B. So yeah, that's a little bit long introduction of where we are.
What a journey. Help me understand where you found the motivation and the confidence to go from a consultant, well, first of all, from a consumer in the food industry to a consultant in the food industry to an operator, and then in leaving in going from an operator to an investor. What has been the thread of motivation and the accumulation of confidence to take these different seats at the table?
I always like to tell people we are not here to create another fund just for the sake of investing through a fund. It's really purpose driven. And obviously through all the 5 years of multiple projects in the food and agriculture industry, you clearly see there's a big gap there. And there is a huge opportunity. We're talking about $1 trillion industry that is in dire need for disruption. And if you look at China at a macro scale, China represents 20% of the world population, but only has less than 7% of arable lands. So how are we going to feed 1.4 billion people without hurting the planet? Is going to be a very serious, question for us to answer. But if you look at the traditional venture environment that is related to food, a lot of people invest money into coffee shops or tea shops or even, consumer products. That is not going to create a more sustainable impact. And so when I started to, realize there's so many big problems for food security, food safety, protein security, or even animal and crop health issues, I decided that I wanted to do something. I wanted to create an ecosystem or an open innovation platform to support technology that can address those issues. So when I actually quit my career in consulting, I spent 3 months traveling around the world because I realized there were actually 30, 40 fund managers in Europe and in the US that were dedicated to addressing agriculture tech and food tech space. And I wanted to know why they're doing that. And there were actually also some successful access stories. In 2013, the Climate Corporation, a precision agriculture startup founded by a ex-Google engineer, was sold to Monsanto for $930 million. And that was a great successful story. And that is almost marked the beginning of the agri-food tech investment thesis. And so I remember I visited Israel, Netherlands, London, Spain, Boston, New York, San Francisco. I visited all these fund managers. And because these are all first wave of all the fund managers that are dedicated to this space, so they share a lot of amazing insights with me about how they go about identifying these type of deals, why they're confident about this sector. And that really gave me a lot of inspirations. And then taking back all these inspiration and reflections, you would automatically think that China and Asia will represent even larger opportunities. China is the world's largest country of food production and food consumption. So if we can really solve certain subsector challenges, the magnitude of impact that we're talking about is massive. But there was no one doing it in China and Asia at that time, back in 2016. So that was when I realized, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If nobody heard about food tech and ad tech in Asia, why, shouldn't I be the first one to tackle this issue? And so that's how we decided to, create Bits and Bytes in October 2016. And, you can tell from the name of the fund, Bit and Byte. Right, and bit is basically the minimal unit of technology and science, and bytes is the minimal unit of food system. So we wanted to really create that scalable impact one step at a time, and that also aligned with our Chinese name, 实行. That's also resonates what we want to go about it.
Tell me more about the specialist approach to food tech. It sounds like you went around the world visiting specialist food tech funds and learning their best practices, and then you discovered that nobody's doing this in China or in Asia. What is the advantage that a specialist fund has in this sector versus a generalist venture fund? Firms that might have a lot more investing experience than you do. But what are you bringing from the food side that, or how does being a specialist fund affect your strategy in investing in a way that generalists can't get in?
I think there are a couple points here. Again, we didn't really think that China doesn't need another Bits and Bytes if we're just going about invested in TMT or consumer-related investment. There are already a lot of amazing, notable fund managers out there that can grasp all these business model innovation and growth opportunities. But however, if we look at the value chain from farm to table, there's a lot of complexity issues out there. If you wanted to make a small impact to the food system, it's extremely complicated. There's a lot of regulatory hurdle that we need to overcome when it comes to novel food application. When it comes to science and technology, what works in the lab doesn't translate to scaling up, building your own facility. And not to mention, you need cost-based innovation, because we're not talking about pharmaceutical industry. We're talking about massive scale when it comes to food and feed. So how do you come up with a scalable approach with affordable cost to the market? That is also another really challenging pathway for us to figure out. So it's a very, very complex industry we're in. And so that's why being a specialist definitely gave us a very special deal flow access. And so because we have since built this ecosystem since 2017, and we have amazing backers from Syngenta to Adecil to Temasek that are always in this industry for multiple decades. So we can really learn from all these amazing high quality insight that we know what type of problem that we should look for. And then we're trying to connect the dots by finding the right scientists and technologists with the industry experience so that we can really push that products to the market. So it's a multifaceted approach that you really need to succeed, I would say, in the agri-food industry. In the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of hype in this industry that was not necessarily good for the sector, in our opinion, because a lot of generalists, fund managers that trying to, ride this hype, and then they bring the valuation up. They think that they can use the TMT style growing at all costs approach when it comes to apply to the agri-food sector. And so that was not necessarily healthy for the long-term value creation for the sector. So by having a specialized approach, we definitely think that we will be able to identify fewer deals, but really doing the right thing. So I think that really helped us stand out.
I want to double click on what makes the growth trajectory of a food tech company maybe different than the growth trajectory of a TMT company, or taking a different approach, whether the investors or the founders, how should they think differently about growing a company in this space?
Since we really specialize in the agriculture and food industry, and then we're early stage, which means that the company, by the time that we invest, are typically just got their technology validated by one or two commercial partners and ready to scale, or they're about to raise their Series A capital to really build their first facility for the full commercialization. So at that point of time, the biggest risk there is really the product market fit. What is the value proposition of your novel ingredient that eventually the consumers will accept, or your B2B leading industry players will eventually adopt and accept the cost that you're targeting. So that usually is the biggest risk that we're facing. And the market adoption cycle for a food ingredient or even a feed ingredient takes 2 to 3 years. Or when we invest in a gene editing new crop, that usually takes 7 to 10 years to get the full food safety certificate, biosafety certificate to really commercialize the product. So we need patient capital in this industry. We're not here to imagine that you can just scale up from one tea shop to 1,000 in a year, or having a SaaS platform that you can have million customers to sign up and subscribe in a year. And so that's why to really link up with the right set of ecosystem partner is super important. And that also explains why, a third of our LPs are institutional investors, because they're deep in the industry and they're also hungry for all the science-led solution to help them find their next wave of innovation growth. So that I would say is just very different from a generalist investor or a TMT investor that all about the value and how scalable and how fast you can grow. It's very, very different from our impact first approach when we screen our investment opportunities.
People use the word ecosystem a lot of different ways. Tell me more about how your LPs help you and how you help your founders post-investment.
I really like what David Swenson said about, people, right? It's for VC, if you want to build a successful track record, it's really about building that secretive relationship with the highest quality of people. And that's really our investment style. We don't usually publish a lot of media or publication, but underneath, that's really all we spend our time with, all the way starting from our LPs. Our LPs are actually the best source sometimes of our high quality deals. We usually don't work with our any FA to get the deals, although we screen 1,400 deals a year. But eventually, out of the 6 investment companies that we eventually pull the trigger, usually those are the ones that refer by our close networks or the proprietary deals that didn't really go out. We like to internally joke about this, that the best companies, they don't need FA because the investor will find them. but only if you have the good network. And so we really have a very close relationship with all our limited partners. On a regular basis, we exchange notes, we exchange insights. They share with us their problems, and then we go out and find the right type of companies for investment. So that's really the type of the investors that we want to spend our high quality time with. And then after those 6 companies became our portfolio companies, we also take this approach that we wanted to invest fewer deals and bigger amounts. Because, when you have a AUM of 100 million, you can either choose to invest 100 companies with 1 million each, or you can choose to invest 10 companies and, 10 million each, and then get a board seat position and spend 10 times on one company. And so we definitely take the latter approach. So half of our company, we have a board or a board observer seat, and we really go out there to help them find, companies. So out of our 16 portfolio companies, 8 of them are overseas. And those overseas companies, we really help them to identify a lot of the ambiguity that a lot of overseas founders will find very challenging, from technology transfer. How do you find the right factory that doesn't just want to steal my strain? How can I find a trustworthy factory partners to scale up? That would be something that we will help them to do, or even to help them interview and identify the China CEO to build the China businesses. That's also something that we will get our hands dirty to help. And even for the Chinese company, if they really need someone that can help them to strengthen their financial rigor, to go out and help them to set up their budget plan for the next 2 to 3 years, we will also just sit at their office for 2 weeks and then build the Excel sheet for them. So we really like to go out there and become part of their entrepreneurship team. That's really what we believe, by invested in fewer deals, larger amount, and we will continue to have that investment strategy for our next fund as well.
How do you think your experience as an entrepreneur informs and empowers you as an investor?
It really started with passion and purpose. And just like being an entrepreneur, you are riding a extremely lonely journey, and you can only focus on the road, not the wall, because you have so many challenges and roadblocks that you're going to face every day. And same thing, if I become an investor, that also means that we're ready to spend another 7 years with this founder. And this founder is going to have a lot of bumping roads along the way. And how do you sit with them when they are facing a lot of stressful and challenging moments and make the most informed decision? That is really difficult. And I think just because being an entrepreneur myself before, that's very, very connected. I actually personally like to send books to those founders on a regular basis, because, reading a lot of books, knowing how do you continue to lead the change when you're facing through a lot of dark moments. Especially now, funding environment is definitely hitting a lot of roadblocks now, and a lot of investors are reserving their dry powders and focusing more on the cash generation and profitability rather than growth right now. And this venture environment is not going to be brighter for another 2 to 3 years. So how do you sit down with those founders and still cheer them up, or, give themselves the hope and courageous mindset? I think that is something that I think is super important. And the other thing I would say is really the resilience, right? Like, I am a first-time fund manager, and so I know how difficult raising the fund would be. And being an entrepreneur as well, you need to continue to craft your story and continue to find the right set of investors. And that's going to be a very long-term journey. And so, just by sharing my own personal experience and how I continue to build that hope and resilience to keep going and growing and developing with those entrepreneurs, I think that continue to be a very core values and culture at Bits and Bio as well.
I think that resilience and that emphasis on that growth mindset and the continuous needing to, test oneself is part of the beauty of the journey, whether as an entrepreneur and investor. And it's also a kind of a good opportunity for us to shift the conversation towards wisdom. What are the lessons that we've learned, and what have you learned, whether from finance or from food, that can extend and can, create value for people outside of food tech investing? What are generalizable lessons that you've learned from your experience that, maybe we can all integrate into our own lives or our own practices?
I think about a year ago, one time, my executive coach asked me, what is your time worth? And I think that is probably one of the hardest questions I've ever received, because when I used to work as a consultant, that's a very easy question, right? I charge an hourly rate for a senior executive from a Fortune 100 company, and then, that's my time worth. And however, when you started to become an investor, that becomes very difficult, because your time is calculating based on the impact that your portfolio company collectively creates. And that's a long-term time horizon. And we wouldn't know whether those companies will succeed or fail until another 5 to 7 years or even 10 years, when the whole fund life cycle is completed. So it became a very sensible question that every day, every morning I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, do I feel energetic? Do I still feel passionate? And I'm very glad that, after founding Bits and Bytes for 6 years now, I still feel so energetic every day I wake up. Because I feel like every day I'm trying to create something different and something meaningful to the universe, to the system. Although, we as humans is so little, it's so minimal compared to the whole universe. But every single day, I know I don't regret, because I'm working on something. I'm solving a problem for our portfolio CEOs. I know put the money that I raised to put into a new technology that could change the aging population's health. That is something that I feel like, my 24 hours is very well spent. So I will urge everyone to think about that question and trying to answer that in your own terms, in your own way.
My guess is that a lot of people are still in situations where one way or another their time is priced by an hourly rate or by a market or by a salary, and they don't have that, necessarily that bigger purpose or passion that you've been successful in finding. You were able to make that transition both in terms of autonomy and in terms of a greater purpose. And can you give people advice, people who are still in that situation, who are maybe, in consulting or investment banking, or, working a job that maybe is good pay, or they're learning something, but they don't truly feel that energy every morning when they wake up?
I think by the end of the day, the essential part is that you need to find your passion. And the passion doesn't need to be that you have to start your own business, but you find something that you feel that this is really worth spending your time. I have a lot of friends that are, listed company CEOs. They love creating, massive value, leading, 200 employees, 300 employees under their arm and running a, multi-billion-dollar company. But it's just so that I guess I love risk-taking. I love creativity. I like to choose a path that less people traveled. But it's fine. Everyone should find their own meaning. And if they said they haven't really found their calling, you never know. Maybe in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, that opportunity will come grasp you, and you will see that, wow, this is really something I wanted to do. And then you decided to jump the boat. I feel like the biggest way to deal with uncertainty and fear is taking into action. So, every year, every 6 months, every quarter, I like to have a little notebook and then just reflect on myself, how do I spend my last 3 months or 6 months? And looking ahead, what would be the intent? It's not goals, but intent. How do I want to spend my time to continue to identify new opportunity, new passion, new hobbies? And I think those action plans are the key to keep you, continue to go forward and find something that you might feel that this is something that is more meaningful than your status quo.
What about food? What have you learned from food or agriculture that can teach us something about life?
Definitely food became like my personal passion. My biggest regret is probably that I really want to be a chef. I want to open my real restaurant, but maybe I will. I was too busy being a farm manager right now. So maybe until 60, 65, I will then finally retire and then go to a chef school and craft my chef cooking skills and open a restaurant. I don't know. But for me, really just watching those chefs work is the biggest art of making, in my own opinion. And I myself became really, really extreme as a consumer in the fitness and wellness, because for me, I love to say food is the best preventive healthcare. And if we can just make sure that every single 3 meals a day that we intake, because we are what we eat. So if we can make sure we have a balanced diet, we have a healthy diet, eat less, eat more balanced, then, you will be less sick. And I have a very strong conviction that in our generations, you and me, we're very likely to live until 120. But if we have such a long lifespan, the key is how do we enlarge our health span? I don't want to be 90 years old and then sit on a wheelchair for another 30 years. I want to make sure I can still put my carry-on luggage myself on the plane when I'm 90 years old. I still want to lift weights when I'm 100. So how do you make sure that every single calorie that you take is helping you to get there? That's the lifestyle that I'm really, really passionate about. And so that is basically what I do.
I love that emphasis on the minutia, that every calorie. I like to think as, I'm in the communication business, and I think that every interaction that we have with every person, every day, every moment is an opportunity to practice how we communicate. And I'd love to think of the same in terms of food, how every calorie that we input in our body, in every meal, every day, is an opportunity to practice. Is it health? Is it a form of self-respect, a respect for the environment? What are we practicing when we eat?
I like to always encourage everyone to think about every single food that you put in your mouth. Think about where that food comes from. And if you start thinking about it, that's going to be a rabbit hole. In China, as an example, to eat a broccoli, usually that will take 7 to 8 wholesalers and distributors before that arrive on your dining table. So how do you know that the broccoli is not contaminated? So the best way or the safest way is to really get to know the farmers that grow your broccoli. And it's every single consumer's right. I even tell my friends that if you go to a restaurant, it's your right to ask the chef, where do you source that chicken? And what is the supplier? Are you sure that that chicken is raised naturally and without any antibiotics used when they were baby chicken? Knowing where your food comes from is almost a human right, and it's super important to think about that. And then also after you eat it, where that food goes. If you don't finish all your food, that becomes waste. And 1/3 of the food in the world right now is waste. And that really create a lot of huge issues for us as well. So again, food is not just a functional, essential need for humans. That is so much more. And that actually caused a lot of war across all the country. Look how food could be political, right? And then all the trade war, the first thing that the U.S. banned during the trade war is actually soy. And China used to be the biggest importer of soybean and corn from the US. And now our chicken and swine have no feed to really feed them. So food can be political as well. So trying to think beyond just eating 3 meals a day, and you will find out that, wow, food system is such a massive issue. And we as a citizen can all contribute every single time. And in my point of view, one of the key issue is that the food industry and the healthcare industry are just broken. People are fed by the food industry that pay no attention to health and are healed by the healthcare industry that pay no attention to food. And all the different countries are paying massive amount on the healthcare bills. And, if you think about China, for example, 12% of adults in China are diabetics type 2. And now 1 in every 5 children in China is obese and overweight. And these are all foodborne diseases that related to your lifestyle. And so why don't we trying to put more food education to all the Chinese family, trying to help them, give them more right information, how to make a more informed food purchase decisions until, it became too late for them to have high blood pressure or all the other foodborne diseases. So, food topic is such a big topic that I feel like every single one, even being a consumer, can trying to think more. I always urge people to think more, to eat less. We've been eating too much and think less about our food system.
You mentioned earlier mindful eating. At a micro level, what does that look like? You talk about, including thinking about where your food comes from, but what else? What makes mindful eating? And in almost in like practical terms, how would I practice with the next thing that I eat?
I think nowadays, most people, even in China, are eating too much. So I've been practicing intermittent fasting. I only eat 1 meal a day, 3 days a week. And actually eating less make me feel healthier and actually also lighter and also better for your longevity. I think now because of the rising middle class population in China, they're eating more and they're thinking that I need to eat more meat. I need to order a lot of food on the table to show our social status. Actually, just be a mindful eater. Just eat 70% full, or sometimes just skip a meal. And you're actually contributing to a more sustainable food system. And you're contributing to a lower carbon footprint. And so this is something that you can always practice as a consumer, or, trying to eat more local food. In Shanghai, there are a couple organic farm, trying to just subscribe the veggie box directly from them, or even drive your car to visit the farmers on the weekend to ask them. Just like going back to the traditional farmers markets, you will meet the farmers that grow the food for you. And you can ask them, if you don't use any pesticide or chemical fertilizer, how do you grow your food without, having them being contaminated or, eating by the insects. So there are many, many things that you can do, being a more conscious eater. And again, know where your food comes from and know where your food goes. I think that's always a very good way to be a conscious eater as a consumer.
I think there's always been traditionally a sense of trade-off between maybe quality and price, about the ability to get access to these pesticide-free foods or organic foods. What does the future look like for us? Are we entering an age in which we'll be able to have abundance of high quality food at low cost? Will that no longer be a trade-off? And if so, how do we achieve that? Or will new trade-offs emerge that we're going to have to think about?
That's a really, really good question, especially when it comes to the agri-food investing space, because cost is king and taste is king. For all the novel food, if it just like tastes like a food for Mars, then nobody will buy it, no matter how cheap it is. And I always like to say that the biggest challenge for all these food tech startup is that how can you make those novel food taste better than fried chicken? That is so difficult. And the cost of all the good food, like you mentioned, how can we make them more accessible and affordable compared to the cost of bad food? That is also the big challenge. And that's where the technology comes in. And I like to say, we invest in those technology companies that can scale up with affordable cost. So when we screen those food tech or agri-tech deals, how do we get to the right unit economics is always the most important investment decision that we need to make ourselves. And like you said, the access to those good food need to come with a more affordable price. And that's why, organic food, even in the US, after, penetrating for more than 20 years, is still around 5 to 6%. And that is also only belong to the privileged people. So that is not going to be the case for China, right? So how can we continue to bring those safe, better, more nutritious food accessible and affordable to 1.4 billion people? That is a very important investment thesis for us. And that is where the science and technology can come into place. And that is why the synthetic biology is such an important science space for us to look into. And that will be able to make the crop and animal or even human health likely to happen sooner with affordable cost.
Matilda, thank you so much for this conversation. My final question is, what's your favorite food?
I love eggs. I think I'm always a flexitarian, and I always said that it would be very difficult for me to convert myself into a vegan because I love eggs so much. So no matter where I am, I eat around 4 eggs every day. That's a lot of protein there, but eggs, you can make more than 100 dishes easily. So if I only have one food for the rest of my life, that is probably and definitely to be eggs.
All right, I said it was the last question, but now I have a lot of questions about eggs. First of all, 4 eggs a day. Do you cook them the same way every day, or do you have this 100 recipe egg cookbook and you just eggs take all shapes and form for you?
So because I do usually only one meal a day, so I skip breakfast and lunch. So the only one meal that I would do, I really trying to use my creativity style. So sometimes I would do a 30-day challenge that I need to cook a certain ingredient and vegetables without repeating myself the way that I cook it. And so, of course, I leverage a lot of on YouTube, on Masterclass, on a lot of the chef bloggers that I follow. And really, for me, cooking is such a mindful process. Even peeling the garlic, even chopping a carrot into slices, that is a very, very mindful 1 hour that I don't need to look at my laptop, and I just listen to music, and I really enjoy the process of cooking. Even eating as well, you should definitely not put your phone on the dining table. You should use that eating and appreciation of food to use that 30 minutes, 1 hour with your family and friends to really reflect. And so, that would be something that I would say that can apply to everyone.
I think a really formative piece of literature for me was Angela's Ashes, a memoir of poverty in Ireland by a writer named Frank McCourt. And it describes this family who is just absolutely broke. They have no money. They're on it's a family of 7 or 8 or 9 kids and a deadbeat dad. And they're on the brink of, malnutrition all the time. But on some special occasion, it's somebody's birthday, they're able to get enough credit at the local store. They're able to borrow enough money at the grocery store to buy one egg, for the whole family to share.
Right.
And in this memoir, he spends pages describing the process of boiling the egg and then peeling the egg, and then the family cuts the egg into little bits and everybody gets a little fraction of an egg. And then he describes putting the egg on his tongue and like the melting, and it rises into a near orgasmic experience. It's just this, it is a rapture of tasting 1/7 of an egg. And I remember reading that and thinking, I will never enjoy food as much as this man enjoyed that egg. And yet also taking that as sort of a challenge, that every time we eat an egg or eat anything, can we ourselves reach even just a fraction of that rapture and of that enjoyment and of that miraculous gratitude? Just how wonderful it is that the texture and the taste exploding on our tongue, reacting with our bodies, becoming a part of us. It is just a miracle that takes place multiple times a day, and it's a damn shame that we aren't paying attention so often.
Yes, I would say food is just so essential. So it's definitely largely a overlooked area, and it's definitely underinvesting. So I really hope, one of our mission for curating this ecosystem is also to highlight how important and urgent the challenge in the food system. And we hope that more and more fund managers that will also cultivate more of their time and resources and capital into agri-food investing. And as you know, that the rising popularity for climate tech, agri-food is also one of the largest contributor to the carbon emission. So hopefully there will be more and more fund managers, especially in China and Asia, that will be able to come into the space and make the truly impactful investments.
Well, it's really a terrific impact, and thank you, Matilda, for leading the charge.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To support, please check out the links to our sponsors in the show notes, follow me on LinkedIn, and of course, subscribe to The Essence of Investing wherever you get your podcasts. With that, I'm signing off, your happy and humble host, Jonathan Reckman. See you next time.